Well, what a beginning. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our workplace flexibility session for the modern family. We've got lots of you here in the room and many more online, so thank you for taking the time to join us. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. I'd like to extend that respect to elders past and present and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. For dive-in goers, I've spoken to some of you who have participated in many of the sessions this festival and also previous years. I've always really looked forward to seeing it in my calendar because it's great to carve out space to talk about how we can increase diversity and inclusion, I've just combined them, in our industry. So it's really good that we're all participating today. I'm really excited to partner with Berkshire Hathaway Specialty Insurance, and CVP are very proud to bring today with them to you. There's a quick note, we'll be using Slido for questions, so for those of you in the room as well as online, you can put any questions that you have at any point onto Slido. For those of you in the room, there's a QR code on your chair. Otherwise, you can go to your browser, put in slido.com and the #CBP. So I'm going to introduce our panellists today. We've got a really great combination of people joining us. We've got Matthew Clarke, who is Head of Professional Lines at Berkshire Hathaway Specialty Insurance. We have Genevieve Muir, who is co-founder of Connected Parenting, and Andrew Murray, who is one of my colleagues and partners here at Colin Biggers Paisley. If I could welcome you all up to the stage, and we can begin. And feel free at any point to put your questions into Slido because we will make it as interesting and discussive as we can. So if I could ask each of you, starting with you, Andrew, to give us a brief, this is me.
You've already done the general introduction. I've been at Colin Biggers Paisley for about 12 years now. My partner and I recently had a baby boy, Thomas, who's now 13 months old. As a gay couple, that wasn't the most straightforward of processes, particularly because it happened obviously in the middle of the pandemic, and it happened also in Canada. So the surrogacy paperwork in retrospect was probably about that thick, and the COVID paperwork to get to Canada and back in the middle of the pandemic was about that big. And let me tell you, 2 weeks of hotel quarantine is a great way to bond with a 3-week-old kid. So that's sort of the backstory, and I think we'll probably flesh out a bit more of that on the way.
Thanks, Andrew.
And hi, I'm Jen Muir. I'm the founder of Connected Parenting. I work with parents to help them with their parenting. I do one-on-ones, online education. I work at the Mater Hospital in North Sydney, helping parents when they have their first, second, third or fourth baby, if you're crazy like me. I'm a mum of 4 boys, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about inclusion and diversity and parenting.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you. And I'm Matt Clarke, work at Berkshire Hathaway. I guess for my role, I'm a father of 3 rapidly growing boys, and my wife and I work full time. So, like many people, we've probably been juggling for the last 15 years, and for large parts of that, feeling that we're not doing either job particularly well. And now I'm in a position where I manage a team of 21 people. And so hopefully I can support them as they sort of move through these milestones themselves. So,
Thank you. So we'll start just to give some context for the discussion today. Being here in life and so in real life and virtually, it's a really good marker of the world we're living in at the moment. It's a time where we really can create the kind of workplace that we want. There's like once in a lifetime opportunities at the moment. The Industrial Revolution in the 1800s was a game changer for workers. It brought them from the fields to the factories. Then after the World War II in 1940s, game changer, women entered the workforce. And the COVID pandemic has seen all of us leave offices and go to our homes. And we're coming back now, but now's the chance to go, well, what do we want it to look like? And how can we create the best life for us, both personally and professionally? And it's really exciting that we're having this discussion now because we can craft how we want it to look. So with that in mind, I should say I never really thought about flexibility until I had my first child, and then I realised it was something that I really wanted. But there's many reasons that you might want flexibility, not just parenting. There could be caring responsibilities, or even, again, as COVID has shown us, you might have passion pursuits that you want to do to make your full self, content. So with that in mind, Matt, in your role as a leader, how do you think leaders can support and encourage leave takers? So it might be extended leave, parental leave, or any other type of leave.
Yeah, look, I think the important thing to understand is that no two teammates are the same, and their needs aren't the same. And so being open to having a conversation and to hearing what their needs are, I think is the most important thing to start. From my perspective, if we just focus on parental leave for a moment, we've had, and I was sort of doing the numbers the other day, there's been 10 of the 21 people in my team that have had parental leave in the last couple of years. And, so I would say the needs of all those people are different. What they view as support is different. And so having regular conversations, communication is the biggest thing, right? It helps with everything. What's worked really well is sitting down and understanding what they would like to do through that leave period, having a plan beforehand, agreeing a plan beforehand, but then also just checking in on a regular basis as well to kind of make sure that that's still the case. It's fine to say, hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but then, a baby comes along and changes a lot of things, right? And so that plan may just go straight out the window. As long as you're having that regular communication, I think both parties can adjust to that, but it all comes back to that communication at the outset.
And I imagine there's some people who really want to take the leave and don't really want to be connected with work at all, and then there are others who are like me, actually wanted to keep that connection because it was just something that you enjoyed, or you needed to feel the security of touching base with your employer while you're on leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had people the full spectrum, and I do think we might get on to sort of returning to work, but I think that's been a smoother transition when you keep some level of engagement with people through that extended leave, whatever that's for. But I tend to let the teammate kind of drive the conversation, so they might just want to catch up and have a chat with an adult, right? Because they're stuck at home.
Other than the supermarket person.
Well, yeah. That's right. But then they might want to tell you all about the milestones that their child's been ticking off, and that's fantastic. Or they might be really engaged and just want to know about work. Where's this up to? How's this person doing? And so again, I think as a manager, you just got to be flexible to that and just hear them out and roll with it, I guess, a little bit. Yeah.
That might be a good time for you, Andrew, given you've recently just taken an extended period of leave, to share sort of your experience of that journey.
And again, because of the COVID thing, it meant that we had to get over to Canada and do all the paperwork, that side of things, well in advance of the anticipated birth. And with the prospect that if we acquired COVID on the way over, particularly since we transited at LAX, which was shocking when you leave Sydney Airport and there's 5 people walking around, you're on a plane with more staff than there are passengers, and then you get to the United States, which was freak show really, just people everywhere on top of each other, very confronting. But there was a prospect that we'd have to quarantine, prospect obviously the baby could come early, so I ended up taking 2 months annual leave just in the process of getting over there, having the baby, getting all the baby's passports and permission to come back to Australia, and getting back to Australia and going through a hotel quarantine. Then my partner, who's a chef, went straight back to work. I became the primary caregiver, and I took up our firm's 16 weeks paid parental leave policy, and then basically just stayed home with Thomas for that whole period, which was fabulous, which was a great privilege. And I had very little to do with work during that time, apart from the odd, chat with some clients and the like. But I had, and this is where the culture of the place is an incredibly important factor, but I had basically a team of partners who I work with who took my practice, looked after all of my clients, and kept everything churning along. And then I came back and they delivered it back to me with a bow on top. And then it was really quite seamless. And that was very very fortunate. And then the other side of the equation is coming back. Again, I should recognise, because it's a bit later in my career than most people would be experiencing parenthood. I'm a partner, I'm not working for anyone. I've got the ability to negotiate timeframes with clients without, the work around me for and my needs and my family's needs, and daycare and things like that, without, other people for whom I might work if I was more junior, just negotiating things in my absence and then handing them down and saying, oh, well, you can't do that, that's okay, we'll get someone else to do it, which isn't an adequate situation. So I was very lucky, but managing that return to work is a lot easier when you're more senior, and we should recognise that it's a lot harder because you have very little control in your home life with a newborn. You have virtually no control in your work life at that level, juggling the two, and I think we need to be mindful of those issues in particular.
Thanks. And I was going to bring Jen in at exactly that point because you're the expert in this field. The rest of us are just fumbling along.
We're all fumbling along. There are no experts.
Thanks. So in terms of let's still transitioning from a workplace to suddenly taking leave and then grappling with that and then being ready to re-enter on whatever then flexibility we can arrange. What do you see in your field of how people adjust to that new parent role taking extended leave?
Look, I think that we are parenting in a different world than we were, and we already were. So we know that the village has changed and the information overload that parents are dealing with these days is enormous. So they start their parenting journey already under, I think, more pressure, and it is harder.
Is that because we've all read those books about how to be the perfect parent and then it doesn't work?
But also the village has changed. So if you track back 30 years even, we really had one parent that would stay at home, mostly women, and be the primary caregiver. And the shift we've had is enormous, and that's a really good thing. So we're seeing, when I'm in the hospital working with brand new parents, I'm seeing lots of young mums and dads and mums and mums and dads having their first babies, and particularly I'll tell you the changes with the dads because they're on the ground doing absolutely everything from the get-go. We know the benefits this is going to have for babies and children. We know that if dads just have 1 hour of skin to skin with their newborn babies in the first week, it changes cells in the baby's brain, wires the baby for connection and relationship going forward, but it actually impacts the dad's brain and wires his brain for softness and for fatherhood, which is just so amazing. And we think dads would have missed this. They weren't even in the hospitals, and then they were very much the breadwinner. So we've got these modern millennial dads, a lot of them, or not.
You weren't looking at Andrew then, no.
I like to think I'm a millennial, but I'm not. Anyway, they really want to do it quite differently, and they really want to take a lot of leave. They want to be there and do it flexibly, and then COVID just sped that up and compounded it. So now they know they can do it flexibly, and they really do want that. And so it's how we now support mums and dads or parents to do their work and juggle their family, and then, as you touched on earlier, everybody feeling like they're doing none of it good enough. That's, and we'll get to that at the end, I know, but yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So any other tips on the leave, actually, when you're away from leave and you're thinking about returning to work? What kinds of things should you be thinking? And to pick up Matt's point too, should we be having the conversations at that point about what we want work to look like?
Oh, we should. Yes, we should always have conversations. Yes, definitely thinking about it. I think in terms of my work, it would be assisting people to expect and be okay with imperfection, that it might feel hard to put your child in daycare, and that's a process and that's an okay thing, and there's some really great benefits that will come from that. We know that there's no wrong way to raise a child. Like, they need connection and they need warmth and structure, and then how we do the rest, it's all, you know, it's all okay. So it would be really prepping parents, I think, for the emotional adjustment. I don't know if you'd agree.
Yeah, I was
but the emotional adjustment of what that might feel like to put your child back in daycare, and some of the questions you'll have about yourself as a parent. And then what you touched on as well, where we're thinking about touching base. I mean, I know all those things in terms of touching base with your employer and negotiating some of those things that might make a difference. All of that will make a difference. But I think the biggest adjustment for parents is actually walking away from that child and then getting the work hat back on and then kind of juggling those things.
How did that go for you?
So the daycare part was interesting. I mean, we're very lucky because we've got a community-based daycare centre virtually at the end of the street who have been absolutely fabulous, and we got a spot which was not easy, as a lot of people have already recognised, and we were lucky in that respect. I guess, so when I went back to work, Thomas was almost 6 months, and my partner kept working, and we put Thomas into daycare, but he's a chef, so he's a bit more flexible. So we put Thomas into daycare sometimes 3 days a week. And I had a range of reactions when people asked, and I said that, some of them sort of looked at me in a funny way, like, oh, you're abrogating parenting. And I mean, we're in a position where we don't have parents who live close, we don't really have any, you know, we've got a lot of good friends, support. But no support that we can just say, here you go. And so we're quite reliant on daycare. But in retrospect, I mean, and again, because we're lucky with this daycare, I think even if we had the choice of not sending him, I still would have sent him, because the development milestones, the learning that they get, and seeing people their age and slightly older, because they split them up. He's in the under twos, but I just don't think he'd get that same rapid development if he was stuck at home with two Gumby dads who were navigating their first child, whereas they've got these incredible carers at daycare, more educators than carers, who can also give us feedback saying, you can go with a bit less mushy food, he's ready for this, and it's just that great blend of
That's kind of the
skills.
village that Jen was talking about.
Yeah,
that actually becomes part of the village.
And I think that's the big adjustment we need to make, because often we know we want to have the work-life balance, and we know it's good for our kids and it's good for us. I mean, ultimately the best thing you can do for your kids is make sure that you look after you. And so it really is, it's all about modelling. So, there are so many advantages to all of that stuff, and I think sometimes we know that at a cognitive level, but then at an emotive level we're thinking about, well, should I be doing it that old way? And actually, we need to rethink the village, and it is a combination. Even first-time parents, they walk out of hospital and I say, yes, use the village or create a village, but also you're going to have to put your hand up and ask for help. You might have to pay for a lactation consultant. You might have to get someone in to help you with your baby's sleep or look at daycare. All of these things are part of the modern village, where I think we do need a bit of extra help, because it does take a village. We're not meant to do it alone. And it's not, as you said, it's not in the interests of our kids to try and do it all out on our own. So bringing in that village, and yes, it's a paid village, but what a good one.
It's still a village. So women and men who work in daycare are angels, in my view. There was a question in relation to whether we are seeing an industry shift towards more men taking parental leave, and there was a specific question for you, Andrew, which was whether that was a difficult thing for you to negotiate. And I think you've kind of already mentioned you do come from a position of privilege. But I mean,
that's a great question, and the privilege, and I guess the luck that I had was twofold. One, from my team and the firm, the support that I had and the ability to do it. But the second, the response from my clients was overwhelming.
That
was positive. They checked in on me. I got a hamper from one of them when we were back. I mean, it was just...
Was it a hamper for you or a hamper of nappies? Did it have wine and cheese?
No, it was definitely a heavily alcohol-scented hamper.
That's a good hamper.
It was a great hamper. But it just, I didn't expect it, and because what we're doing is still a bit out there in the whole scheme of things. And I felt a bit reluctant to share it with some, but just completely blown away with the support.
This is the beauty of the conversation, because the more we talk about all our individual experiences, Matt, you were going to say.
I was just going to say, certainly within my team, I would say there's more and more. There hasn't been a dad who hasn't had a child in the last couple of years who hasn't taken the extended parental leave. And I've encouraged them all to as well. If it was available when I was having my kids, I would have loved to have done it. It's, and I think in the past it has been sort of for people in more privileged positions, but now companies are recognising that, and it's not a maternity leave policy anymore. It's a parental leave policy. And, if we're looking to get women back in the workforce, we need to make sure that dads are, co-parenting and taking on some of these responsibilities as well. So, I do think there are more and more dads that are doing it, and certainly I've encouraged everyone in my team to do it when it's available.
And definitely what I'm seeing within the hospitals are dads are there and they're very much planning to take extended leave, which I think is incredible. When I had my eldest 13 years ago, my husband took a month off. And people at his work said that is career suicide. You will regret that, and he doesn't. And he wanted to then work flexibly and have Fridays working from home, a bit more time with the baby. And again, people said, you're mad. And now I'm delighted to just meet thousands of dads, non-stop, and they're all, I'm taking extended leave, I plan to work flexibly, I plan to be involved, we're going to, and they're going to structure it so that maybe one partner does the early bit and one partner does the next bit, and they will get so much out of that. From the parenting perspective, not only are we then able to more interchangeably do the job, like how good is it if we both know how to put the baby to sleep? That's so good. It's better for our kids. They get not just one but two really great caregivers that they can rely on, which is, fantastic for our kids. So it's just win-win.
I agree. I like to call it sharenting. I think if they're engaged together, you're sharing the parenting. And if you do it from the beginning, all of the little micro developments and progressions, whether it's sport or school, become a shared commitment. It's not just landing on one person in the relationship. So it is great to see it starting so early. So now we've kind of covered the extended leave period. Let's talk a little bit about what it's like when you actually do then come back to work, because flexibility has to work for the business as well. So there are two sides to it. It's got to work for the employee. It's also got to work for the organisation. What do you see? I might start with you again, Matt. What kinds of things do you find that your team are looking for when it comes to flexibility?
Yeah, so, I think one of the key things is obviously they tend to build their time. They come back, maybe a couple of days a week and then build that up over a period of time, which is completely understandable. It may be working from home more often, working from different locations, starting early, finishing early. Often, again, the juggle, one parent drops them might drop them at daycare, the other parent picks them up in the afternoon. So it's, I guess it is just that, I don't want to use the word flexibility, but it is kind of being flexible in how you allow them to return and not being focused so much on rigid. Hopefully, I think businesses have kind of moved past this, but not sort of looking at a 9 to 5 type, time at your desk equals a good job kind of thing. Again, people's needs will be different, so making sure that you check in regularly, making sure that it's working for everyone. You talked about the needs of the company, and I think that's important as well. In all of this, the business has to continue to operate and continue to move forward, and so I think that's not something that we can lose sight of. And that's probably where the culture of the team is really important. And, I think I'm in a lucky position here in that as a company we have a fantastic culture, sort of a selfless culture where everyone's looking out for each other. And, I think Andrew sort of touched on other people picking up work and things like that. Because we've had so many people who've had extended leave, we've had people who have been more willing to step in and help out others, and maybe more and more of our teammates are becoming our village, as well. And so that
has assisted enormously in people transitioning back into the office, I think.
I think I certainly find in the insurance industry we tend to become lifers. We really do become very loyal to the industry and want, because we love what it does for our community and the support. So it's a long-term game. It's not just a short-term job. It's a career. So it's sort of easier in that respect to then jump in and support your colleagues, because everyone in the course of your life will go through different phases where you can work huge hours or you need to dial down and dial up.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I know for us, we put a huge focus in getting the right people, finding the right people, and you've seen over the last couple of years how difficult it has been to get, it's a whole war on talent. We put all this time into getting great character and great capability. Why would we not? We want those people to stay, not just in the industry, we want them to stay with our company. And so if that's your end goal, then you need to work with them through the milestones of their life. And, so it's not just about parental leave. I know we've sort of probably focused on that now, but it might be people looking after elderly parents, whatever that is. If you want them to stay in the business over the long term, then you need to work with them as to how you navigate those milestones.
Do you see anything in supporting new parents, Jen, as they are re-entering the workforce? Because I know I've certainly heard, and I won't look at anyone specifically, daycare can be the petri dish for the family.
I was just thinking that.
And that's a real challenge, because you can negotiate flexibility, but there are the things that you can predict with kids, it will be unpredictable.
And then everything falls apart.
Yeah. So any tips?
Yeah, look, I think, again, going easy on yourself, and I think that flexibility is good, but then that understanding that there will be times where everything just falls apart. Kids will get sick and it will all happen at once, and it will happen one after the other, and you can't predict. It's that unpredictability of it, I think, that's really, really hard. And so supporting people with that, I think, is one of the key things.
I've had a great question here, and I'm going to put it to everybody. Is your organisation having private facilities in place to allow for breast pumping and safe storage of breast milk during work hours for multiple women at the same time? And I'm going to say why I love that question, because I know when I started a long time ago, there was a woman who was sharing stories of having to go to the ladies' bathroom to express. And have we progressed? I know we have a safe space here in the Sydney office. I don't know if it's for multiple people at the same time, but we do have storage facilities as well. So I don't know whether you would know the answer for Berkshire.
Yeah, I don't. I'm sorry. So, yeah, I'm not sure.
And Jen, is that something that you...
I work in a hospital.
You have lots.
I'm teaching parents, and they're feeding in front of me. So,
So it's not really a private space, but it's happening.
The boobs are out.
Is that something that you find new parents are concerned about or ask for your advice on as they're returning to work?
Look, I'm sort of more at that starting point, really, at that point. And then I think what they really... Look, I think that would be an issue if you're returning to work, obviously. You want a safe space to feed, 100%. That's really important that I think we put that in place. But I think it really is... What I hear about is that emotional support with parenting, with not feeling like we can be a good enough employee and a good enough parent at the same time. It's the juggle.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that, because there are days, my children, I've got 3, they're all now teenagers, but there are still days in the morning when I walk out the door and it's all just gone diabolical, and I feel like I cannot bring my best self to work. Any tips? I'm sure all of us, whether your parents or not, will have those days when you're just not at your A game. What can we do?
I think the pressure to be a perfect parent these days is enormous. When I had my eldest son, this was before social media, 13 years ago, and there were 3 parenting books on the market, and now there's this enormous pressure. You've got advice coming from everywhere, information, social media, comparison, and we live in cities and we have to work. That's the reality. So we are working and we want to work. So it's a different world as well. So I think parents are juggling a lot. We're busier than ever, and we're wanting, because we've read all these books and we've got all this information, we want to do all the things for our kids. We want to turn out a really great child. We want to really nail parenting. We come at parenting often a little bit older with a little bit more experience, and as a result of that, we're wanting more from it. So we're expecting more of ourselves in our parenting, and we're working. and the village has changed. And so it's a lot. And a lot of parents are feeling not good enough. And so what I try to work with parents on is embracing the concept of good enough parenting, which is a term coined in the 60s, which actually it sort of explains a way of parenting that is best for parents and, this is the good news, for kids. So it sounds a bit like sort of, you know, not good enough, maybe, if you want to be perfect. But actually, these days, we're kind of overdoing it. We're spending a lot more time with our kids than any previous generation. And so we're trying to, what I try to work with parents on is understanding how to connect with your kids in ways that's efficient, that works really well for our kids, and then turning down the pressure on us to be perfect. And if I can tell, do I have time to tell a really quick story?
I think so, yeah.
So, you know, one of the best examples I have of this, when my husband and I we had 3 little kids, and we were walking along the beach in Noosa. And at this time in my parenting journey, I was at a point where we couldn't go anywhere near anywhere with fine china because, you know, my children would break something. And we were walking along, and I saw all these families with children younger than mine. They were sitting up at the fine dining establishments in Noosa, and they were eating with knives and forks. And I turned to my husband and I said, we have failed. We have failed here. Like, look at us. We're not across this, you know. And I was working, he was working, you know. I said, look at us. We haven't even taught them to eat with a knife and fork. And my wise husband said to me, we haven't failed. It's not what we're focused on. And so what I try to do is bring this concept to parents of, we're sort of, it's almost like we've got a dashboard in front of us with parenting. There's all these knobs and we've got them all turned up to 10. We're trying to do everything at a 10 out of 10. So I'm trying to focus on how I feed my child, how I educate my child, you know, the kind of partner I am, the kind of worker I am, and everything's up at 10. And actually what we need to do is pick a few things we really want to focus on, turn some of those knobs down, and know that good enough parenting is really good for kids, because what it does is it encourages resilience and all these other great things we want for our kids. So when we're doing too much for our kids, we can actually be doing them a disservice, which is a relief. So I think the other thing parents can say in those really tough moments where you think, I'm not good enough, I'm not nailing this, this is all going, you know, like you say, chaos, like the stuff hits the fan, and you think, oh my goodness, you just think, I am doing the best I can, and so is my child, and that's enough. And that can really help. So
thank you. I do have another question, unless you wanted to add something to the good enough. I like the good enough. It's just trying to put that into practice. One of the question is, the modern family can of course include having no dependents, and how do you manage this to ensure that all team members have access to flexible working? And this person was saying it seems sometimes that it's only really granted for parents. Do either of you have personal reflections, Andrew or Matt, in your teams?
Yeah, I guess, well, it just goes to that point of, you know, and particularly now, I think post-COVID, right, everyone has, you know, a life outside of work, and perhaps we didn't talk about it as much previously, but there's more and more discussion around that now. So people are saying, I want more balance. And what does that look like? You know, for us, like, I think it's important to focus on the output. Rather, as I said, rather than sort of the time at the desk. A good job is not coming in early and going home late. It's actually, we focus on the job being done and the output of the individual. Maybe they're in the office, maybe they're not. You know, maybe they got in at 7 and they left at 2. Maybe they got in at 10 and left at whenever. Right. So if you take it away from, I guess, the older stereotypical way of measuring what a good job is, then I think that probably allows more flexibility for more people.
I think you're right. I think the pandemic has absolutely fast-forwarded our ability to make it not just about parents having flexible working arrangements, but all types of people. Were you going to share something?
All I was going to say was that's perfectly true, and getting it right in terms of if we get it right for parents, we really get it right for everyone. Because the same principles absolutely apply. I mean, it applied to me for most of my professional life until we decided that we wanted to have kids. I mean, we have in our firm people with extremely varied interests. We have eminent musicians, some of whom might be in the room, and just people with a range of interests that shouldn't be bound by
That's right.
9 to 5. And so there's two sides to this. I think I mentioned briefly before about the negotiations with clients. I mean, where are the expectations about deadlines and work coming from? I mean, so long as we're addressing the expectations of our clients and having the conversations with our clients, I think historically, I'm talking from a law firm perspective here, we've been reluctant to have those conversations and to say, well, when do you need this buy-in? Can we do this in this way? We're just like, oh, yes, and not really thinking about the needs of the team and the way that we can deliver the services more efficiently or in a more
Yes, well,
clever way that allows us to have that flexibility. And I think we should be having those discussions more and more.
yes. So that, again, it comes back to those conversations, and not just internal conversations, but external conversations. So as service providers, we absolutely want to provide an excellent service, but we need to be together on the journey about, well, our people are still people and they have lives, and you'll get a better service when you've got happy, committed, devoted staff. I also know that there's lots of experiences here at Colin Biggers Paisley. We have extra paid leave arrangements, so if you want to take extra leave, and that's not just for parents, that's for who anybody would like to take it. And so same as I think Matt identified, the pandemic really has completely lifted the opportunity for people to work flexibly and remotely.
Yeah, I think Jen sort of touched on it. I see my role as a manager is to get the best out of my team when they're working, right? So if things are going well outside of work, you can bring your best self to work, right? And so if I can help manage that, then that's what I see my role as. So.
Oh, I think that's brilliant. I think that's great. I might now move to whether we have experienced any obstacles against working flexibly. What do you perceive might be some of the challenges for creating? We've already touched on your organisation needs. It's got to be a multifaceted process. You need to have buy-in from both employees, clients and the organisation. What are some other obstacles? It's hard after the pandemic, isn't it? It's like technology, maybe.
Historically, it's been technology,
Yeah.
but the pandemic resolved that issue in large part for a lot of us. Not everyone, and not everyone can overcome some of the strictures around the type of work that they do by, working remotely with technology. My chef partner can't work from home.
No, or nurses, or school teachers. Yeah.
So there are still those challenges.
And also access to care and that village. So if you can't get, like you said, it was hard to get childcare, access to care, access to family members when kids are sick. So depending on what kind of village people have at home as well, that's going to make a difference.
And affordability of childcare and affordability of all those things are massive issues for people.
Yeah, so there really has to be investment from the organisation, but also from the community at large to create the opportunities for that creation. And what do you think long term? Do you see flexibility as something that you just do for a period of when you've returned to work, or is that what life is going to look like now until we retire and beyond, for those of you who want to keep working forever?
I hope that's life.
Do you think? I mean, there's a lot of dialogue at the moment about employers wanting everybody back in the office, and there's a real tension between industries and organisations about what that might look like. I'm interested to hear whether you think we will revert.
Look, I think most won't go back to sort of a rigid 5-day a week. And I don't know that anyone does 9 to 5 necessarily, but a rigid sort of work week in that fashion. But I do, for us, like we really value the culture of the company, and a big part of that is actually the people that I get to work with, and as great as it was through the pandemic to be able to sort of access Teams and all these sorts of things to keep in touch with people. I think about the younger teammates that I have, and we're not in the office together, they're not hearing the conversations that we're having, and a lot of what I learned and what they're missing out on are those conversations. And so again, that's the balance piece, right? And I think probably sound a bit like a broken record, but I think that's where people who are looking for the leave, they actually need to be a little bit flexible in how they approach that as well, and making sure that they're not having a negative impact necessarily on the rest of the team in their approach to flexibility, I guess.
So I was just going to say on that very point, before this session, one of your colleagues was talking to Mel and I about, are you back in the office or not? And they said, we're not required to be back in the office, but a lot of us have made a collective decision to come back in the office because there are new starters. And that's exactly typifies what you just said. I mean, that's really the culture. And I think at the moment there's a bit of a pendulum swing back the other way. We'll find an equilibrium, but it needs to be found.
I was just going to say, as a mum who's returned 4 times from having a baby, there is nothing better than putting on some work clothes and getting out of the house and just going, here I am, and nobody's crying as I use the bathroom, and I don't have to wipe up under that hard chair 50,000 times. Like coming back to the office for a parent who has been that not sole parent, but primary caregiver, can be an absolute joy, aside from all those benefits of mingling. It really is like, because we don't have that village these days, I think having that balance of home and work really is one of the best ways to raise kids.
And like you were saying, bringing your whole self, I think you were saying that too, Matt. Actually having an identity at work is really valuable for many of us, I imagine. And so to maintain that whilst also having either a family or other interests outside of your life is actually where you're going to have a very satisfied life. I like that. I must say I really enjoyed coming back to work, although on my first return I was told I had wheat bix on my shoulder and it kind of crushed the joy I felt after putting on a suit.
or Vegemite smeared or snot.
But it is interesting to see how we've evolved and what it's going to look like going forward. So can we, I think we're almost out of time now, if we could move towards each of you, and I know you all have different views, what the ideal flexible workplace for you looks like. And bearing in mind what you've said, there's certainly benefits of collaboration, but there's also a lot of millennials who like to have their own interests, whether it's gym or art or music. So how do you get the best out of everyone? What would that look like for you, Andrew?
Well, I think we've really encapsulated it. You need to have flexibility, you need a culture in a firm that fosters it and supports one another. You don't get that culture without having shared experiences and being together for some of the time. So you can't really have one without the other. So to me, it's the workplace that recognises that and is able to strike a balance between achieving the flexibility that people want while still achieving the cohesive culture that people need to have that flexibility. And that's not something that happens automatically. It takes a lot of thought and attenuation and respect and discussion. So that's to me what an organisation should be striving towards.
I like the respect and the discussion. Jen, what do you think it would look like?
I think from my perspective, some of the things I know you guys are already doing, but helping parents get prepared before they go on leave. So to understand what they're going to be facing as a parent, getting them prepared for staying in touch with their organisation while they're on leave, because that helps that reintroduction back, and then continuing that conversation. I definitely think continuing to be responsive and acknowledging that yes, people will work flexibly and walk out at 2, but they're possibly going to be logging back on at 10. I mean, I run my own business. I don't stop working, so I'm always online.
No, that's a really great point, because historically there would be the perception that person perhaps wasn't as committed to their career progression because they'd walked out at 2. So
that's right. But often people are jumping on and answering an email, and that's not ideal always too. Very, shout out for self-care. Yeah. But we are the added bonus is we are contactable at all times, and we are being very responsive. So it's kind of acknowledging that and finding that balance, I think.
Thank you, Jen. And Matt?
Yeah, look, I think a workplace that acknowledges the lives that people have outside of work, again, I hate to use the word over and over, but it strikes that balance between the needs of the company and the needs of the individual, and can support every teammate no matter what stage they are in their career, no matter what stage they are in their life, and and so that when they're at work, they're the best people they can be.
Thank you. There's a definite theme here about culture, and the Dive-In brand, this festival, is Braver Cultures. So I think this is up to all of us to keep those conversations happening and to just talk about all of our unique and individual circumstances, because no one person's experience is the same. So we shouldn't make collective decisions. We need to consider everybody's situation individually. Well, I wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining us, both virtually and IRL, which I know, thanks to my teenage children, I can now speak in acronyms. LOL. And if I could thank our panellists, starting with you, Matt, thank you very much, and thank you to Berkshire Hathaway. It's been great to partner with you. Jen Muir, thank you very much for your expertise.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Andrew, for being so honest and sharing your experience. Thank you, everybody. I think that's a wrap. I should say, for those people in the room, there are refreshments outside if you feel like, I just feel like I've got to whisper because the online people can't join us. Thank you very much.
The forward shark, the high chair is